Welcome to Layer of the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, 5 of the most iconic bass lines from Iron Maiden's Steve Harris. I was once on a bass forum and someone posed the question, what's the big deal about Steve Harris? Well, I'll tell you what the big deal is about Steve Harris. He's the founder, leader, creative vision for one of the biggest and most influential heavy metal bands of all time, Iron Maiden. He's one of the primary songwriters for the band, and in the early days of the band, he was really the main songwriter for the band. His bass style is legendary for how fast he plays with his right hand, the galloping rhythm, which is a signature of his sound. His sound is, in my opinion, one of the best bass sounds in heavy metal. Bass a lot of times in metal is a little bit hard to hear. His bass jumps right out of the speakers. Very easy to hear in the mix. He's got a really identifiable, unique bass sound. And because of all these things, his bass playing and his bass sound is very much a part of the Iron Maiden sound. When you think Iron Maiden, his bass playing, his bass sound is an integral part of that equation. So, what I decided to do today is pick 5 of what, in my opinion, are his most recognizable, his most iconic bass lines. I think because Steve is one of the primary songwriters, and like I mentioned, especially early on, his bass parts a lot of time define the songs or carry the songs or have some of the most identifiable parts in the songs. So here are my 5 picks for Steve's most iconic bass lines. Number 5, from the first Iron Maiden album, the song Running Free. This song starts with some tribal drums, and then Steve comes in with that signature bass line for the song. Simple bass line, but it's deceptively hard to play. And it's hard to play, and what makes it sound so unique is the rhythm and the way Steve approaches it with his right hand and his left hand. A lot of people talk about Steve's right hand and how fast it is, but for me, it's the way Steve works between his right and his left hand and the rhythmic feel of the way he plays that. There's a certain accent and punch to the way he plays that line, which makes it jump out in the song. And really, that's like the main riff of that song. So, great bass line, number 5, Running Free from the first album. Number 4, of course I have this on vinyl, but this is the only Iron Maiden cassette that I have, so I thought I would show it. From the Somewhere in Time album, the song Wasted Years. This song starts with a very iconic guitar line, the open string, dun, 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 pull off thing. And then Steve's line comes in with that melodic, descending bass part. And then when the song kicks in, it's the classic driving Steve Harris line. And in the chorus of the song, where it does the always searching for those wasted years, and he does that ascending bass part. To me, that's just as much of a hook in the chorus as anything, as the melody line. And then when the guitar solo kicks in, he's doing all those really cool bass fills. He's doing the driving rhythm and all those cool bass fills, where he jumps up high on the neck. And to me, those bass fills are as important to that part of the song as the guitar parts are. You know, so you add all those things together, and the bass is a really important, identifiable part of that song. So number 4, Wasted Years from Somewhere in Time. Number 3, going back to the first album, you might have guessed that I would pick this song, Phantom of the Opera. Now, let me tell you a story about Phantom of the Opera, my experience with that. I started playing bass when I was like 10, 11 years old. And at the time, my bass teacher, who was a nice guy, but he was an older guy, a country picker, guitar player, didn't really play bass. And he told me, bass players, they only play down low. They never play like up higher on the neck. Well, we had just gotten MTV. MTV had just came out. And one night I couldn't sleep, and I went downstairs and decided to turn on this brand new thing, MTV. And in the middle of the night, they were playing the entire Iron Maiden at the Rainbow concert with Paul Di'Anno on vocals. Yes. Can you imagine a time when MTV would be playing an entire Iron Maiden concert at night like that? Yes, there used to be a time when MTV was cool, kids. So I come downstairs, turn this on, it's already halfway through it, and they're playing Phantom of the Opera. And that part where Steve goes up and does the bass solo. And here I am, my 11, 12-year-old, just started playing bass. Mind just gets blown. My jaw drops, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? My teacher told me you only play low notes down here. This guy's way up here, and the bass is way out front in this band. And I was hooked from that point on. I was an Iron Maiden fan, and I went out and got whatever I could from them and followed them since then. And I became a Steve Harris fan on that night too. So that song, for that bass solo alone, completely iconic and legendary in heavy metal and Iron Maiden history. The bass in general in that entire song drives a lot of the sections in that song. Underneath the guitar solo, he's got all those cool walking lines and the keep your distance part. He's playing that rhythmic part. Just fantastic bass playing, some of Steve's best. Number 2 for me, from the album Powerslave, the song Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. This is one of Iron Maiden's greatest epics. And in the middle of the song, when everything drops out and all you got is the creaking board sound effects and the spoken word thing, and it's Steve playing that quiet three-note pattern underneath. And then halfway through it, where the pattern changes and Steve starts plucking the notes in the opposite direction, it's like, yeah, it sends a shiver up my spine. And then everything drops out and he plays that legendary melodic line bouncing off of his open D string, down, 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 down. Just great. And it ushers in the whole second section of that song. That whole middle section of Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner is completely carried by the bass. That's a good 2 to 3 minutes of just bass carrying everything in that song, and a perfect example of how Steve Harris's bass playing is such an integral part to the structure of a lot of Iron Maiden songs. All right, number 1 for me. Now, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but these bass lines for me are, again, Steve's most recognizable and iconic. They're not necessarily Steve's most difficult or challenging, hardest bass lines to play. For me, I wanted it to be about those lines that you hear right away and they just scream Iron Maiden and Steve Harris. So the number 1 for me is probably Steve's best bass line, in my opinion, that he ever came up with. It's not super difficult to play, but the second you hear it, you know that it's him and you know that it's Iron Maiden. It encapsulates the Iron Maiden and Steve Harris sound. And that's from the album Killers and the song Wrathchild. Now, I've probably heard them play this song maybe one too many times live, but when that kicks in and you're at the show and you hear that, I mean, that's it. That's Iron Maiden in a nutshell right there. And again, it's not a super hard line to play, but it's all about Steve's note choices, his attack, the way he locks in with the drums, his bass sound, the way it sets up the whole song. just fantastic. And later on in the song, during the guitar solos, when he's doing all those bass fills, I mean, if I had to give somebody one Iron Maiden song that represents what Steve Harris is all about, I would probably pick Wrathchild from Killers. Okay, so there you go. Those are my picks for 5 of Steve Harris's most iconic bass lines. I could easily have picked 5 or 10 more, and I think I'm definitely going to do another video with some more of Steve's bass lines. But let me know what you think. Let me know some of your favorite Steve Harris bass lines down in the comments. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and click the bell icon. And until we see you next time, remember to stay heavy and stay metal.